Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
60% of the time, it works every time.
That doesn't make sense.
This is Sparta!
It's the Al Trafford Show. 60% of the time, it works every time, and that doesn't make sense. I've got him. Representative Jeremy Munson on the program. Love having this cat on. Jeremy, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Al. How are you doing?
Good. You're doing this new thing. You got a radio gig thing you're doing, political pitchforks. When you started that, tell us about that. Just a 3 weeks ago, right?
Yeah, it's so Susan Sjogren Smith asked me to do a weekly radio show with her to kind of long format discussions, have lots of candidates and legislators on to talk about stuff in the weeds. And we started a new series of interviewing candidates for statewide office. So we had a U.S. Senate candidate, Adam Schwarzy, on last week. We're going to have Kendall Qualls, and it's not just for them to come on and give us their campaign speech. We meet the candidate, but then we actually digest the weekly political news together, so that you get a chance to listen to your candidate or somebody, how they react to the week's news.
How? And this is on what, K Talk, right? No,
it's on
the Patriot. The Patriot. How did you handle doing that with all the news in the last 10 days being about the shootings and the death of the Hortmans? And, it's kind of a weird walk to walk, isn't it? I mean, how political do you get while we're in this time? Well,
I served with Melissa, as one of the Democrats I continue to text and stay in touch with. And it was absolutely tragic. But, when I was going to go to the funeral and I reached out to the House to talk about, what the process is, I'm sure it's going to be a lot of people. And they said, oh, it's going to be a small funeral. It's not going to be politicized, political. It's friends and family. And then all of a sudden it turns into this, circus with, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and stuff. And it became very political. And they're already talking about pushing a bunch of gun restrictions in a package of bills based on her death, and it's so they're politicizing it. We didn't talk much about it on the show, other than just to talk about some fond memories over. But the discussion of politics doesn't stop. I know it can't, but I mean, there's always that sensitivity, and we're going to get on it now. We're back. I want to throw this at you. This is news to me this morning, and you probably know about it. Minnesota GOP Chair Alex Plakash has announced that Jennifer DeJournette, and I'm going to get her name, DeJournette? DeJournette, okay. She's no longer the party's executive director. And if you read the little thing, we've concluded that the traditional role of executive director may not be the best structure for operational success. My team is reviewing the structure and considering realignment options. She's out. Do you really get rid of your executive director and then start looking at other options on how you run things? Seems a little backwards. Why does the Minnesota GOP look like they try very hard to not be competitive, to not do the right thing? Well, what you're witnessing is the result of this clash between the grassroots party and the congressional delegation, which has really been strangling the party out of money this past year, or so far this year. And there's been a lot of friction as the party is supporting more of the grassroots initiatives, and what we saw play out in CD7 last year. I don't want to speak too much about it right now, but it looks like the grassroots and the party are kind of lost with with her departure. Okay, so this isn't helping. I guess what I'm saying is everybody's taking them with no money. You're not going to donate. I get it. You put your money where your mouth if you don't feel you trust it. I don't know what it was, that other podcast guy. They were sending him money to do pieces on us through Wyoming. It got really ugly, and I just don't know. And I don't know what this Plakash guy at all. I don't think I've ever met him. Is he the guy to get the Minnesota GOP through this, in your opinion? I don't think so. I think he was a compromise candidate. I think his heart is in the right place, but he's not taking sides.
as a result, both sides are kind of distancing themselves from him. And when I say both sides, I mean the grassroots versus the establishment. And I don't think it's going to be a successful party this next year, especially when we have the midterms and the 2026 election. There's a lot of opportunity to win elections, and people were inspired last year because of Elon Musk and Doge and all this fiscal conservatism. And what we're seeing out of Washington, D.C. this week with the big, beautiful bill, which I call Build Back Better 2.0, it's growing government, not making, implementing any cuts, any significant cuts. All the cuts in that bill are for years 5 through 10 in their 10-year budget. Well, they're not going to be in power, 5 years from now. And so none of the cuts are going to happen. It's just going to grow the deficit. And a lot of the fiscal conservatives in our party, on the side that I'm at, are really upset.
Well, and rightfully so. You talk the Doge move, right? And you get this list on the internet of all this weird, crazy money that they found, and this is bad. And the first thing to do is do a continuing resolution that just let that continue on. Don't worry, we're going to go get it. And then you get to the point where the big, beautiful bill's going to get done here. And I think it was $400 million or something is what was actually out of the Doge money that's got. I might be off on the number. But how did every Doge thing not get sliced?
Right. And Elon was really partnering with Trump because we need to make substantial change. People there's a lot of spin around the budget and how much spending we are. But, every year that we go through, every year our government spends like almost $2 trillion more than it brings in. Yeah. So when you're talking about when the budget talks about cutting $1.7 trillion, that is over a 10-year period, and that is in years 5 through 10. They're actually increasing spending about half a trillion dollars in the first year. So it's bringing our annual deficit, what we, are adding to the debt, $2.5 trillion. Trump called for a balanced budget when he won election. Hey, give us a balanced budget, meaning don't spend more than you bring in. And this is the response: is we're going to spend more.
And what's that going to do to them? And let me ask you this: the Republican Party, do they not have the moxie, even amongst themselves, to throw this up one bill at a time? The big, beautiful bill. Oh, you mean another one of these where we throw everything, omnibus bills we can't keep track of, so everybody can have a little skin in the game? Why not do it one at a time? Here's this bill and what we're going to do, this bill and what we're going to do, and then each and every Republican either stand up or don't, and we'll know who's in and who's out.
Right. Traditionally, omnibus bills were used to log roll the minority. So the majority would just, put enough stuff in there so the minority likes it, and then just, push it over and literally just roll them over with this bill. But when you have a trifecta like we have in D.C., there's no reason to do this. And you should be giving everybody, an opportunity to vote for bills on their own merits. But this is a way for removing transparency, so you don't know how people vote. And I've seen Republicans in the majority not want to cut any spending. And it's just, we need to get back to being fiscal conservatives and explaining to people that we need to live within our means.
And who's taking us down that road? And what I mean, that you get the Donald Trump sweep in because of what he said. Were they all just blowing smoke and jumping on the bandwagon and know that this was never going to be, never come to fruition? We're never going to go back to the old ways and actually fight for smaller government. We just fight for a slower growth in government. Is that what the Republican Party is now?
I'm sad to think that it may be. I know that there's fiscal conservatives out there. Thomas Massie and Rand Paul are the people that represent me most in Congress. Mm-hmm. And you see what's happening to Thomas Massie this week, where they're just trashing him because he was the sole, no vote on the bill. And it's gotten worse since it went to the Senate. They've stripped out so much, stuff, the welfare for illegal immigrants and stuff like that. Yeah. And when that comes back, it's going to be even worse than when it left the House. And I don't know how they get this passed.
Well, what's interesting to me is that if you do nothing, everyone's taxes will go up. They don't talk about that, right? Because the tax level we're at now is going to sunset. All your taxes are going to go back up unless they pass this. So then it's like, okay, no one wants to have their taxes go up. Nobody. So why not run that bill separately? They put it in this because then Donald Trump can say, see, it's the biggest tax cut in the history of whatever. It's going to leave your taxes right where they're at. Let's not try to overspin stuff, right? Am I mistaken on how that's working?
Well, it depends on how you view taxes. I think that unless there's I think unless there's spending cuts, it's still a tax bill, right?
Yeah.
Inflation came through, and I know we call it Bidenflation, but the inflation that we've dealt with the last 4 or 5 years is directly related to the spending they did during COVID, during Trump's first term, and because they spent money that we didn't have. They printed money out of thin air. It devalued our currency. Inflation is a tax, and unless we get our spending under control, it's still a tax. It's just not. It doesn't happen immediately. But they should pass the tax cuts. They should secure our border. It doesn't take much funding to secure the border, but they need to make significant cuts. And I mean, how do you explain to people that, look, if your annual spending, if you're only making $70,000 a year, you shouldn't be spending $100,000 a year. You need to find 30. I mean, we just can't afford it.
We're going to go to break. I want to throw this at you and think about it during the break. We saw what can happen in Minnesota when the Democrats have all three legs of the chair, right? Their wish list, I don't know what they didn't get off the wish list. They hit it hard. You have Republicans in the U.S. with all three legs. And what are we getting out of it? It seems like maybe somebody's playing checkers and somebody's playing chess. We'll talk about it after this with Representative Jeremy Munson.
Think about it. A famous politician once said, "You're entitled to your opinion, but you are not entitled to your own facts." But in a world full of AI and fake news, where can Minnesotans find the facts? Center of the American Experiment is Minnesota's go-to source for fact-based analysis and common sense solutions for taxes, energy, public safety, and our kids' education. Visit AmericanExperiment.org for more information. Think About It is brought to you by Center of the American Experiment, Minnesota's think tank.
You know that car sound that sounds like a cricket playing a banjo? Jays can fix that. You know when you step on the brakes and your car sounds like a pair of tennis shoes in the dryer? Paul is the guy who specializes in that. And you know that sound that never happens when the mechanic's around? Paul took a whole course on that. If you own a car, you need to know Paul. Paul owns Jay's Auto Shop, 202 North Main Street, Blue Earth, 525-1052, 525-1052.
amongst friends. The Al Travis Show. Nothing but talk.
We've got Jeremy Munson in with us talking, about his show especially, but political pitchforks. You can catch him on the radio. Appreciate him on my show. Sir, go to break. The Minnesota gives the Democrats a trifecta. And for 2 years, the Democrats got everything they wanted. I don't care what side of where in their spectrum of liberals you were, you got what you wanted. The Republicans at the U.S., we're 6 months into this, and literally, the midterms are right around the corner. People are going to start running for their seat again, and they've gotten nothing done. That's with all three powers, and even, if you will, Trump has won everything with the Supreme Court in the last week. They are on a high, and yet can't get anything done. Who's smarter about this?
Yeah, a good friend of mine who's a state rep or a delegate in Virginia on social media last week put out a really good video saying that the greatest difference between Republicans and Democrats is that Democrats are willing, when they're gifted the majority or a trifecta, they are willing to risk power to advance their agenda, right? They're willing to do bold things, make major changes. Whereas Republicans, when they are gifted the majority, they want to preserve power at all costs because they don't want to lose election and therefore don't want to advance the agenda. They just want to nibble around the edges and try to spin it to the base. And as a result, they end up losing the majority because they didn't do anything. And so I would hope that we would change things. I mean, the Elon Musk part of this election I thought was so powerful. I had so many people come out and vote because they wanted substantial change. They know we don't live within our means. And recognize, if you have children, grandchildren, how much debt you're burdening with people. We need substantial change.
Well, it was even some of the just ridiculous stuff, putting on Sesame Street and an Iranian version or something. It's like all that stuff is like, I spending my money on that? We're $3 trillion in debt, and I've got dance shows going. I mean, when you just read some of the stuff, you're like, this is over the top. USAID's gone, right?
It's not. It's fully funded in the bill.
In this bill?
Yeah.
Oh my! See, that's where they're going to lose all of us. And I don't know that Musk isn't right that we need a third party. I just don't know what it can stand for. You know what I'm saying? There isn't a lot of room between smaller government. Well, Republicans aren't doing smaller government.
In my opinion, Musk sits on the key because he's the wealthiest non-head of state in the world, and he did set up a political action committee or PAC, and if he would fund candidates who want to shrink government, then he could make substantial change. The problem is that there's not a lot of money in campaigns for people that want to cut spending and cut out the waste, because the largest contributors to campaigns on both sides are taking money from taxpayers. Where Republican business owners get specialized tax credits and handouts and subsidies, and so if you want to shrink government, there's not a lot of donors out there that are serious about it. Elon is, and he could make a difference.
Be interesting to see what he does. One last question for you: the governor, Walz, gave the eulogy, and that's fine. I'm not the problem with that. But his numbers are coming out. The polls come out. He's underwater as far as people wanting to run a third term. Do you think he sees that? What are your thoughts on, will Governor Walz try to get the third term, and can he swing it around and turn his polls around in the next 8 months, 18 months?
I'm seriously doubting whether Walz runs for a third term. Not only is he despised by so many Republicans, the media has pulled out the curtain, so they're exposing some of his bad stuff. And Democrats on his side who would support him know that he's running for president, and they know that the minute he wins his reelection for governor, he's going to be on the road full-time campaigning for president. And so they need somebody who's actually going to govern. And so that maybe they look to somebody like Dean Phillips to come out, and he would be almost unbeatable on the Democrat side. But on this Saturday's radio show on Political Pitchforks, we're interviewing Kendall Qualls, and he's a Republican gubernatorial candidate. We have several more that'll be jumping in the race. I think it's going to be a really interesting race how that shapes up.
Just your thoughts, other than Phillips, who you're right. The governor's already kind of mussed up that field, hasn't he? His lieutenant governor wanted in, but he was playing games, so she goes for the Senate seat, and then, Congresswoman Smith,
Yeah, Democrats are making a circular firing squad for U.S. Senate between Peggy Flanagan and Angie Craig. One of them needs to run for governor instead. Otherwise, they risk losing both races next year. I think. I mean, I'm excited to watch it, but they usually fall in line, and so one of those people are going to drop out.
And then be pledged all the support in the world to get the governor's job. I got to fly. Jerry Munson, love having you on, and it is the Patriot Political Pitchforks is the name of the show. What time are you on Saturdays?
9 a.m. Saturdays, and of course you can go to politicalpitchforks.com to stream the show.
Appreciate you coming on the program, my friend. Thank you.
Thanks.
He's Representative Jeremy Munson.
Chanhassen Dinner Theaters brings you its most